Welcome to the Boost VC podcast. At Boost VC, we are the accelerator that invests the first $500,000 into sci-fi tech startups. And this show is all about talking to investors and founders to dig into the latest topics around sci-fi tech and building great companies. I'm your host, Adam Draper, founder and managing director of Boost VC. Are you ready to rock? Arvind Gupta is so much fun to interview on this podcast. This is my second time interviewing him, and each time we end up talking about what I was not planning to talk about. Arvind just got hired. I'm trying to say not leave IndieBio because he hasn't left IndieBio, but he is at Mayfield now in order to create bigger impact with bigger dollars into the bio companies that he loves. And he's built up this incredible reputation and incredible portfolio over at IndieBio. And he really invented a new model to instill better habits for scientists to become entrepreneurs, something that I'm very passionate about. We cover a lot in this episode. I would say the main core parts of this that I am really obsessed with are there's inequality of wealthy and poor and how the future of feudalism will be dominated and fixed by education. We talk about how basically scientists and a firm education of why equity is so important. Everyone talks about capital, but how equity is the most important thing is a big sort of theme throughout this whole episode. And then about how this generation emerging as the most powerful internet generation cares much more about making a positive impact along with making money. I have a firm feeling that making money is a good thing, but obviously conscious capitalism is important, which is something we also get into. My brain always expands when I talk to Arvind. I'm definitely going to be first in line to read his book. Actually, I already told him I bought the $30 hardback. And I hope you really enjoy this conversation that I had. Today, we're joined by Arvind Gupta, currently partner at Mayfield.
Yeah, crazy.
Bio partner. And so this is relatively new thing.
Yeah. So co-leading the engineering biology practice.
Yeah. And then, but you were also founder of IndieBio.
Yep. I started IndieBio and grew that into a movement where really scientists around the world now understand, believe, and have learned how to create companies based on their insights.
So you're the inspiration of all these scientists who are starting companies now.
Yeah. 6 years ago when I started IndieBio, well, I was told by one of the best VCs of all time that I was on a suicide mission.
That's how you know you're onto something.
Yeah, this person is a pretty... I was like, shit, okay, walking out of the meeting. But, in the end, I figured I'd rather go try something that fit a very unique skill set I had, which was a background in genetic engineering, a background in product development, industrial and user experience product development with IDEO, and startup experience, and blend the three to see if we could use biology to create new types of products. And that was the premise of IndieBio.
And do you feel in that capacity you succeeded?
Yeah, I'm a numbers guy. And so, if I look at IndieBio's results, invested in 136 companies to date. The current portfolio enterprise value is $3.2 billion. That's on a cost basis of $50 million total. So $660 million in change have followed that amount of money we invested.
Well, that's incredible. I always, by the way, I always have admired IndieBio just because of I at a similar time was sort of focusing hard on crypto, and then I opened up a little bit to sort of expanding to what we call sci-fi technologies. But I admired that you went so hard at one specific industry and built out a knowledge base and understanding. Could that have worked for anything? Do you think the way you did it, could you have done it for robotics or space or like anything, or was bio the only way that could have gone?
So all revolutions are preceded by a technology that changes society, or a change in society that accepts a new technology. Those two things are hand in glove. They have to go together. And so right now we're seeing a social shift due to climate change that is demanding new ways of housing ourselves, clothing ourselves, and feeding ourselves in a way that doesn't destroy us.
So sorry, I'm still hooked on like the mind-blowing statement you made about technology driving society driving the movement, if you will. So what you're saying is basically like, okay, my example would be like, because the internet, now we have like equivalent information globally, so that's driving movements in one direction, right?
Right.
And then on like a societal thing, you're using the example of climate change. So we're realizing, because we have all this information now, that we need to make a change, and that is driving change from another direction. Is that it? I'm sorry,
No, that's exactly right. So it's a pretty simple equation, right? Like Gen Z, millennials, they're inheriting a planet that's very sick. They actually care. Gen X and boomers, kind of like, quit your complaining, right? Quit your whining. And a lot of them are like that.
So, well, it's the rub some dirt on it,
Exactly. That's exactly what we do. What we did, right? Well, what a lot of those people don't realize, and a lot of them are investors, right? What they don't realize is Gen Z and millennials will pay a premium for the ability to affect change on their own planet. And how can they do that? Right.
The fact that they grasp that is crazy. Like the fact that I don't think that was something that like I holistically understood, was that like I could make an impact on this. It was always an unfathomable largeness,
right. Of course. And it still broadly is. I mean, how can you possibly help move climate change, right? Like on a personal level. Well, I could buy a Tesla or an electric car, right? Okay, one, right? By the way, that stock is doing pretty good.
It is.
So, two, buy some solar panels, right? Not doing bad either. 3, I could eat less meat, or I could figure out a way to eat in a way that is more sustainable for the planet. Ding, ding, ding. No one thought about that, right? And avocado toast was the big joke from years ago, but no one really understood what was powering that is this idea of moving away from the traditional unsustainable ways of eating for the planet, because they're trying to figure out a new thing.
So veganism, these movements are really about doing better for the world. My co-founder's a vegan, and he's influenced me, where I eat salads for lunch, and like it's fantastic. I'm the lunch salad eater. I tried veganism for a full month, and well, it was really hard, but there's something lacking in my diet that my body needed. So I don't think, every diet is one size fits all. There was something, maybe I could have filled it somehow that I just hadn't thought of, but I cramped when I was on my runs, when I never cramped before. So I was like, but on the other side, like, I'm very proud of him for committing to that, because he felt that was the best way for him to create a mission on it. There's inspiration.
Absolutely. And then there's a philosophical angle on it too, which, how we treat animals in essence is potentially how we are going to evolve as a society, right? So if we see living things as disposable, not edible, but disposable, I think we see each other as disposable. And it's a nuanced thing I'm saying, but it's a very important thing I'm saying. Whereas I'm not a vegetarian, right? I don't eat red meat anymore, but I'm not a vegetarian. Okay, I'm the first person to say that. But I do believe, right? Like the idea of seeing the animals that you do eat as animals and not as a product or something that is disposable is something. It is a different way of being. And I think the way we treat each other as humans is reflected in how we see the animals that we consume.
So trying to see sort of the personification of animals. So seeing the human in an animal, it's not human in an animal. It's like
no, seeing the animal.
animal.
Seeing them as a conscious living, like, because they don't communicate with us using English. A lot of people think that they don't have thoughts. Like, don't have. Sorry, use your words, man. Like I have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old. Right?
One of my requests for startups was just the most ridiculous things I could ever think of, and one of them was communication with animals. I felt like I actually don't think we're that far away. Like basic translation between like my English speaking brain and dolphins, like yips that they're doing. Yeah. Like even just expressing emotion where it's like, hook up something and it's like, I'm angry. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I don't need to poke the dolphin right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You know this because you invest in this kind of stuff as sci-fi tech, deconvoluting neural patterns using machine language and understanding on a broad level what is happening on a electrical and chemical signaling level will allow us to start to decode some of those patterns.
So on the
before we segue.
By the way, I have so many like every time we talk, I have like so many thoughts that you do that thing where you're like it's like a blockchain of thought. You're like, oh well, I have to fork into this direction, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'm thinking all of a sudden, have you ever been to Japan?
Yeah.
Okay, so I first off, probably the best designed city I've ever been to, but like I don't speak the language and I'm able to like ride their transportation. But in New York City, I've been there millions of times and like I still have no idea how to get from the F train to the J train. Like I have no idea how that thing works. But in Tokyo, so I had Kobe beef, like proper Kobe beef, because we went all the way to Tokyo. We decided to spend an amount of time on Kobe beef. But the interesting thing about that, first off, there's this big underground meat market thing of like how they bid for it. Like there's this auction thing, but they actually brought the birth certificate of the cow to the table. And it turns out every cow has a unique identifier that is their nose, not like our fingerprints, but the nose. So I mean, in this, like they did make you look the food in the eyes a little bit while you're about to eat the cow. First, it was delicious, so I am
so
a meat eater. But so thank you, cow. But like it is in that world of you're sort of trying to translate this empathy for animals, life, things, and just knowing that it. I always think it's interesting that we call bacon. Like we always call chicken by its name, but bacon is not called by its name.
Right.
Like, its name is pig.
Okay. Specifically, the muscles around the stomach of the pig, right? So.
Yeah, like I have kids, and like explaining those things to kids, I'm still like hesitant and quirky. Like I squirm around the answers because I'm like, we kill animals, and like I don't know how to sugarcoat this.
There's no sugarcoating, and I think I'm not being moralistic here, and I think that's really important. Like I'm not just ascribing other people's what their morality should be with the future of food. What I'm simply saying is understanding the product in front of us as having once lived is important. And that's why I think having products that maybe never lived in front of us could be an amazing replacement.
Oh, yeah.
Cell-based meats, right? So if we could recapitulate the exact muscle and connective tissue and all the things that we love about protein, yet it never had a conscious thought. That is a much more morally correct meal.
It's interesting if you subtract the moral cost of meat. Basically, that's there's this like I had to wrap my head around the fact that I'm going to eat meat, right? Like I decided that at some point, like I knew that they killed the cows, but if you could subtract the moral cost, I would pay either a premium or at least the cost for like morally good meat. That's interesting. Yeah, you guys did Indie Bio. You guys did a bunch of companies that are sort of replacing that supply chain. So like Memphis Meats and
Meats, Finless Foods, New Age Meats, and then a host of others and other technologies. Take a portfolio approach to solving the big problem because I mean we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry, protein, and no one company is going to own the $1 trillion by any means. And so I think beyond that.
Well, a little piece of you hopes that one company owns it, right? Like,
No, you can't, right? Like, well, do I really want one company deciding on the flavor and texture for what everyone eats? No,
it's a good point.
no. I actually don't hope that happens, right? I want multiple companies to provide choice to people like we have. And I think, food is so socially defined. Like, it's an interesting thing. Like, why do some people like, there's these slimy eggs in Japanese cuisine, for natto, or, caviar, or coffee for that matter. No kid likes coffee first, right? Or, beer, right? You give a kid a beer, right? Like spit it out. So there's so much is learned. And I think generationally, we will learn to eat differently. We're all in our own prison, so to speak. And the prison is defined by our local society. I've been in San Francisco for the past 25 years. I'm into organic food, probably because I'm in San Francisco. If I was in Iowa or somewhere else, where organic food, like, it was just not a thing, I would probably not be that into it, right? Like, you have to accept that.
Accept sort of societal influence in everyday decision making.
And what as an investor, you start to realize that's why you talk about social revolution and technological revolutions go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And we're talking revolutions, not like nice products to have.
Completely. And so you think the revolution, the difference between those two things is sort of the difference between a new meat company and then a meat company that actually withdraws that moral obligation, right?
Not just the moral obligation of removing a conscious animal from the supply chain, but also removing carbon from the supply chain. Right? So the climate change aspect is something that far more people align with than the consciousness of. And I don't push morality on anyone, right? And so look, if we could all get behind climate change to remove animals from the supply chain, great, right? Like, that's a great way to do it. Methane from cows is like one of the cheapest and easiest ways to get greenhouse gases out of the environment.
Yeah, I heard if you feed cows seaweed, they don't pass as much methane. But
yes, and garlic. But the problem is that they taste really funny.
It's like
you are what you eat, man.
You are what you eat. So yeah, that's why they define grass-fed, corn-fed.
The other thing that happens is the microbiome adjusts to the new diet, and over time the methane emissions go back up. So I've looked deeply into these issues for funding companies.
So really, I mean, our bodies are so adaptable. It goes back to there's a sine curve, but like it'll always go back. The average goes back to sort of like that line.
Well, it's like Jurassic Park, right? The famous line. I forget the character's name. Life finds a way. Right? So, yeah, that's really what it is. And so going back to COVID, right? Like, that's just.
So, do you read Jurassic Park like it's a research book rather than like it's a science fiction book?
I really want to fund a company building Jurassic Park. No joke. I half jokingly talk about it all the time. I'm like, oh, okay, the business model's already there. Like, everything's already. Dr. George.
All that we need is the science. Like, we know people are going to visit dinosaurs. Like, we know it.
The science is being worked on right now. I mean, George Church's lab is working on restoring the mastodon and the woolly mammoth. And it's actually like you're taking some of the DNA that's been preserved under ice sheets and fusing that with elephants. Right. And, trying to.
And they teach that in kindergarten, right? Like that's the science that they're teaching in kindergarten now.
So I hosted a class for the Khan Academy labs, which is their physical school, they're running an experiment to try to understand what that would be like at Indy Bio. And it was like in upper middle school, like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, ninth grade. And they knew everything about like DNA and genetics. And like, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, like these guys are so.
When did you do it? Like what time frame? What, like 6 months ago, a year ago?
A year ago. Yeah, it was a year ago. I'm trying to do it every year.
I was wondering if if the kids who have been in COVID the last 6 months got exponentially smarter. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have a 5-year-old and she talks about viruses and T cells and things like that,
Yeah. Because it's just out there. Like they have to.
You got it. It's something that is a topic and everyone's learning it. I call COVID the great acceleration. I think every trend is getting accelerated that's happening right now, including biology, including what I call neo-feudalism. That's another can of worms we could talk about later. But, our society is definitely separating into, instead of having a middle class, lower middle, upper middle, wealthy, it's really becoming wealthy in everyone else. And the social mobility is decreasing rapidly, and soon the door will shut. That'll lead us to a new feudalism.
Do you have any ideas on how to change that? Like inspire change in that industry?
Yeah, I think we need to, one, reinvent education. Education
is the greatest unlock.
That's the greatest unlock. It is what creates mobility. I think the power of capital right now is so great because equity and capital go together. And everyone talks about capital, but no one talks about equity. And, so we hear about universal basic.
And capital just sits there. It doesn't change. Equity is working for you.
Equity works for you. And so when we talk about universal basic income and we talk about we just give everyone some money. I'm personally glad to see the $600 or whatever that everyone got. People dumping that in the stock market. Good for them, right? Good for them for taking a handout and turning it into equity.
Yeah.
And a piece of the capital. That's, I thought, and is it creating a bubble on the other side? Who knows? But that means less to me than the ability for a person to take a handout that would normally be without the access to equity in the stock market. Let's just say they couldn't buy stock with it. Well, now you're just feeding back the corporations, right? You're going to buy some shoes or whatever, and that money just gets recycled back to the top where your capital multiplier is going to further separate the haves from the have-nots, from the masses and the rich. And so,
financial education is something I'm actually I think that just an understanding of how to build wealth rather than make money. They're two vastly different concepts. And I feel I didn't really understand or fathom that. It's that joke where I learn about osmosis, but I don't know how to do my taxes. Right. After I've gone through college, it's oh great, I learned osmosis.
Gas laws, but what's a checkbook balance?
I don't know how to balance a checkbook. I didn't really understand how checks work because I always used digital money basically throughout my whole life. And when I visited other countries, cash didn't make as much sense to me when I was there, and that stuff.
Yeah, that's another topic we can dive into. But I think that's another social technological revolution happening at the same time. So I think it's not fully formed in my head, but I think that's just watching the patterns.
Step one is education is always the unlock, right? It's just always is.
Always is. And then the second is the ability, to enable social mobility, you need jobs that can provide incomes that allow you to either buy into equity or jobs that have equity tied to it, right? So part of my job at IndieBio was to enable scientists who would normally go work for Genentech or Amgen or whatever as a bench scientist to take their incredible insight and turn it into equity that could generate vast amounts of wealth for themselves if it worked, right? And there's some risk in that.
And so in a way, the last, how long were you at Indie before you sort of made the move over to Mayfield, which is, you're still at Indie, but.
Yes, I'm a venture advisor still. I mean, thankfully everyone involved saw the wisdom in maintaining that connection.
Because you actually, what you're saying is you have lived this. You've actually been teaching scientists who really do sort of change the world based off of their science. You're educating them on equity. This is really your mission. This is
100%. 100% why I do it. And I think as an investor, there's an arbitrage in it as well. So that's great. In a capitalist, so I think
there's an arbitrage at scale. See, I always, at scale, there's an arbitrage. Completely. I agree.
Yes. And that's what IndieBio is.
And people don't understand scale 90% of the time. Another thing that people should understand better is just like what scale actually is, because exponential is just so much bigger than you think. Until crypto, I never even firsthand was able to experience like what exponential growth was. You're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll make 2-3 times my money. Like maybe, and then it's just like in the same time frame, it's actually 200 times, like it's a crazy thing.
It's craziness. And so, and it's very powerful. It's very powerful. And so I think that's the key to unlocking, and it's not fully formed, like I said. So, but something I'm thinking about a lot for my next book right now.
I like that you're like, it's not fully formed yet. And then it's like a masterpiece thesis essay. but my whole life has been geared towards this one very specific thing, which is scientists owning equity.
My parents are immigrants, right? Like came here with nothing, and I watched the, work hard, study hard, can't take risk when you're an immigrant, right? And I think I'm lucky enough where they were able to build a base where I could take a risk of ruining my career, so to speak, right? By becoming a VC or maybe by choosing to be a designer, right? Like prior to being a VC, choosing to be a designer.
You had time to take a couple shots because your parents didn't, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's really important. And so like I said, I'm the first person to never push I'll never ever write a blog post on how to be successful. I think my parents should write that blog post actually.
But they wrote how to take advantage of other people's positioning of you. I guess is what the blog post that I should write. So
I think like for us, we're in the position where now we can deploy capital to things that we feel are important and will make money for our LPs, right? We have to make money for our LPs. And so, for me, I don't like the fund I work for cares about making huge returns, right? Number one. And so, I talk a lot about.
By the way, I think that's good, right? Like I have this new thing where like I wrote a post about it, but like making money is good. Like I want people, because I think it actually, as far as feudalism, it could fight against feudalism. Making money is a good thing, and I just wanted to put a little period at the end of the statement that but like it's not. It makes impact. Money makes impact, generates impact, moves mountains, like all that stuff. So I have an issue with people who think that it's not good. So I just
So what my point of view is, and the way I'm living, developing my career, and the way I invest is I fight capitalism with better capitalism.
Yeah.
So that's it. So you're
the new way.
Yes, industry has spent the last 150 years taking animals out of the ground and burning them in order to power all the goods and services, all the goods we want, which is fine because we didn't really know all those things, whatever.
Yeah.
But now we know. And now the world knows, to your point, the internet also allows education to happen much faster. It's not generational, it's within a decade. And so we could then take the technology that we are developing and investing in and provide society that is now educated as to their options, what capitalism is doing, to capitalistically create better returns by changing the way things are done.
Yeah, I love that. There's to the point of the internet and also plastics in the ocean, like all this stuff. It's all a result of tragedy of scale, right? Like the first plastic is not inherently evil. It's actually a great, like it's a low cost, holds things, like all that stuff. And social media, not inherently evil, like all that stuff. But too much of it starting to percolate into the world is bad. And we're learning how to consciously scale. I think that's my thing, is like, I want us, this next generation, where you're saying like, we burned all this stuff, and like we're learning that was not the right way. Like there can be a better way. Like it's consciously scaling, knowing that you could do it with sort of a sustainable cause in there. I love that. That is so good. Okay, I've covered 0 of the questions that I was planning to ask you.
As a matter of fact, like One of the reasons I joined Mayfield out of all the firms is because and Naveen Chadha, who's the managing director, he does actually believe in this. And he just actually released a post today talking about conscious capitalism. And so
conscious capitalism. We got there on a conversation. That is incredible. Okay, and someone just released a blog post about it.
Literally today. And I think it is a clarion call for the entire Valley to say we all have the capital to deploy, and we can move the needle in a way that is either net beneficial for society and for our children, or we could try to maximize whatever short-term thinking we can get our hands on for the next 2 years, 5 years. And I think if you still think in that latter way of the 2 to 5 years, you're literally going to get run over by the social movement that's happening. And that's what I love, right? Like capitalism will run its course, and creative destruction.
We're going to beat it with something that's better, newer,
100%,
stronger.
100%. So
and everyone's iterating on these, the 1-for-1 models, the like all that, like they do want something. And, even funds are trying the 1-for-1 in some way. Like there are a couple funds that are trying to donate on the back end so I have interviewed you before, and it was a fascinating conversation at IndieBio. One of the things that we talked about were this, you said people were moving from Homo sapiens to Homo concilio. Is that right? Designed humans. And is that still the case? Do you think that we are in the bio end of the world still moving towards that? Or are we moving towards a designed society? Or what's your sort of feelings there?
Yeah, so I think, what we're really moving towards, right, is, and I could get technical, but I think it won't help us. But in a sense, we will be transiently designed. And what I mean by that is we won't be editing our DNA in order to change our eye color. That's not Homo concilio. That's not designed humans. What is designed humans is the ability to express or make compounds, drugs, things like that in our bodies by delivering RNA and DNA that our cells then turn into proteins, but never keep, because keeping the DNA is just too dangerous for our future children, right? And so I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, because you could make a choice for yourself. Are you going to make a choice for the rest of your germline of all your children's? That's a harder one, and the dangers associated with that choice far outweigh the risk, especially right now. Like for instance, CRISPR babies, designer babies, not going to happen. Not going to happen anytime soon. He Jiankhe, who did the Chinese researcher who genetically modified those 2 little girls in China.
Yeah.
To not have the receptors that bind HIV to try to make them less resistant. Turns out didn't really seem to work. I actually found the paper that was written as a follow-up that detailed the genotyping of the children. It turned out one of them is a chimera. A chimera is someone with 2 different genotype sets in their body. So why is that? Yeah. Well, it becomes, you'll see it's obvious why in a second. Because when you edit 1 or 2 of the cells in, you're not editing the one cell, the egg that divides. You're actually editing a few divisions in. Well, as that divides out, you get one part that's not edited. If you don't have 100% every single cell edited, one cell is going to do billions, and those guys don't have the receptor, right?
Compounding, it compounds, and talk about scale. Those cells are that is a scale that you can't. I always think humans, we think we know so much, and and even when we find out that we don't know so much, we still sort of try to comprehend how much we know rather than how much we don't. It's I'm obsessed with known unknowns. So space, known unknown, ocean, known unknown, brain, known unknown. Those things are known. We know that we don't know enough about it. basically.
Big topics, right? So like you talked about, could this have happened for space? I think that's one of those technological revolutions that would open up a social one. And I think, that's another chicken and egg thing.
You think the people who get there would start their own like religion on like like where the Mars,
Yeah, maybe they start worshiping the potato or something, or nematodes.
Yeah. The potato. Oh my! I love that book, The Martian, where he grows the potatoes. Okay.
Another question.
The one thing that I do want to touch on, because on the podcast we talk a lot with venture capitalists and different founders in different industries, and I generally talk to sort of jetpacks and exoskeletons, space, all the bio. What is different, you think, about founding a bio-related startup than if I am starting a consumer tech software business?
When you zoom way out, there's no difference. You're either a consumer company or an enterprise company. You look at Memphis Meats, they're a consumer company. You're making food.
It does simplify things to think that way. That's great. I like that.
On the pharma side, if you're making drugs, you sell drugs to doctors. You're an enterprise company. And under the hood, everything changes. Under the hood, your technology is alive. And
to get to the real thing is that it's a living thing.
And living things don't always behave. And I think so if you have think about a factory line, you're making semiconductors. Your little projector or whatever that's going to make the semiconductor on a wafer plate, that's not going to wake up one morning and be like, I'm going to change my shape, right? Whereas in a fermentation batch, let's just say, you get an E. coli that does take on a mutation, and all of a sudden it can survive a little bit better in the broth than the ones that are making your product. And then it runs away and outcompete your production line. Also, your production line is all dead. And, you've got this mutant strain that's really going, man, I love this broth. So it throws a spanner into a lot of the ways that you think about scale.
Because you have to come up with a very specific thesis, but because living things don't always behave. I like that line. I like living things don't always behave. Because of that, you have to be open to sort of absolute I'm wrong, and the way it behaves is this way, and it's this. I mean, a good example is probably penicillin, right? They were doing a lot of tests, and maybe it's just myth, but the guy spilled moldy bread or something.
Moldy bread,
made it resistant. That's interesting. What's another example of living things not behaving? Is it just how humans just never do exactly what you want them to do? I have a 3-year-old.
You and I both. We both know. They're already teenagers at 3. And so I think I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek about it, but the truth is your business is built on repeatability, right? As you scale, you become less agile and more efficient, because as you find product market fit, what you're doing is you're extracting more margin over time, right?
Yes.
It's why large corporations can't take advantage of new opportunities very easily, and why startups have ultimate strategic advantage, because like jujitsu, like what I do, you could focus 100% of energy on one little problem and the big giant can't defend it. Whether that's 2 carotid arteries and strangling someone unconscious or breaking their arm. And so I think, with bio startups, as you're moving to scale, that's the hard part, is making sure your production platforms are repeatable, that you have abilities to really get your processing, extracting your margins.
So if things aren't behaving, basically a business is built off repeatability of scale. And so if things aren't behaving, you can't get to scale because nothing's working.
That's right. And it's not like this stuff is impossible. AB InBev, beer, is our first biological product 3,000 years ago or something. Literally, beer, wine, those are biological products. That is a biotech product.
I'm gonna write that down. That's some of my notes. Beer is a bio product.
It is. It's a product of fermentation.
Just by having something that it's bred in water and it ferments. That's basically.
There you go. yeast converting the sugar to alcohol and burping gas and, all of a sudden that's the bubble. So, I think that's the key. It's not like biology has always been a technology we've used, always from day one. It's on the weapon side, right? Like in medieval days, they flung dead horses and things into people's castles, right? That they were sieging to spread infections. It's not like biology is this new thing.
I did not know that. That seems very evil and pretty smart of someone trying to clear the. I do always think about technology in medieval times, where it's like silk was a huge tech up for war, because you could get shot with an arrow and it could cleanly come out, like, so it would pierce the armor, and that's why the Mongols like won for a long time, was because they were all getting hit, but they were able to move faster than everyone else. It was
wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they wore silk armor so they wouldn't have to be like encumbered by all this other stuff.
Right. So for me, like, I'm a huge fan of history. If I have any free time at all, I'm listening to a history podcast or reading.
Are there any good ones?
Well, the one that everyone knows, Hardcore History, by Dan Carlin. If you out there have not heard Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, lucky you. When you get hours and hours.
I haven't, so I'm excited.
Once you get into it, it's just, you're going to listen to everything he has, which is several hours. He'll talk about World War II or the Mongols, and it'll take 9 hours total. But it's deep. It's deep.
Oh wow, it is hardcore. You're like, I'm committed.
Oh, committed.
Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground. Your career specifically has taken this movement from, well, your parents worked very hard, and then you became a designer, and then you jumped ship to sort of create this new design process for bio-related startups so that they understood how equity worked. And now, how are you leveling up right now, or how are you moving, and why? I was sort of thinking that.
Good question. Good question, Adam. I realized, so as I'm on the board of a bunch of companies moving, to Series B and beyond, raising tons of money. And I started to see that the problems that companies are facing at Series A, Series B require really deep thought and help. And it was right when I was being called back into the basement, to teach the next class, which I love teaching and I love working, with companies. But I had taught and, really help nurture the team at IndieBio, 6, 7 people, now 12 with New York, to really be able to do that. And so for me personally, I realized that for this movement, our movement is super nascent. It's super small and can be stomped out tomorrow. For it to grow and for us to be able to deploy the capital needed to create the technologies needed to save the world in time, we need to not be deploying, like I said, 50 million in the last 5.5 years, but 5 billion, right? And the only way to do that is to go to later stage and rebuild kind of that momentum at the Sandhill level. And so, I looked across firms, and like I said, conscious capitalism being the main driver of it all, and Mayfield being they're a very humble firm. They never talk about themselves or anything like that. They're literally a top 5 firm for the past 15 years. It's amazing returns, amazing results.
Oh, Mayfield's awesome. I love everyone I've ever met from Mayfield.
Yeah, and they're great people, and they've done it through conscious capital. They consciously passed on Yik Yak. So Tim Chang was like, we're not going to feed digital addiction. And so, it might turn into something huge, but we're making a conscious decision not to do that.
That's interesting. I like that as a reason. Like, hey, this is definitely going to be a big deal, probably, but like, we want to build towards a different world, which is how you always hope venture capitalists or people with money are thinking. It's like, I would like the world not to go in that direction.
That's right. And so, building out human and planetary health practice, with Urshit, and Urshit is like one of the smartest dudes I've met. And, he's got a great track record with Mammoth and other companies. Joining forces made a lot of sense because I think I can learn a lot from them about how to build monsterly huge enterprise and consumer companies, right? Like, so talking about what does it look like to build a biology company the size of Lyft, right? The size of HashiCorp, like those types of lessons at the Series A, Series B, Series C board level are the types that I'm facing on the companies that I really care about. And I saw this as me really understanding the late stage. And because I could go learn on my own and have all the mistakes, I'll pay for all the mistakes myself. But why? Because we don't have time. So I'd rather go learn and be, I believe in surrounding yourself with world-class people, and you will become world-class yourself eventually, right?
There is something to that. There is, yeah.
I train MMA, right? And so you're in MMA, you're always only as good as the room you're in, right? And so, the room I'm in now is with Gilbert Melendez, Jake Shields, like Hall of Fame UFC fighters and amazing jiu-jitsu players. And so you're going to level up, right? No matter what, because you're going to survive in that room or you're going to be gone, right? Like you're going to wash out. So I think for venture capital, it's the same way. And right now is a funny time in venture capital. There's money everywhere. Like it's, who isn't a VC right now? It's kind of that thing. But
everyone's a VC. But I think it also goes towards your concept of the old capitalism is going to be eaten by new conscious capitalism. Like people are catching up to old capitalism, and then in the next 5 years, it's going to matter that you're building towards your the world that you want to be provided. I don't know. I love the idea of organisms eating each other. I think that even financial organisms, I think it's fascinating.
They do all the time. No, I think you're absolutely right, Adam. So it's, it's cool. I'm very excited for the future. And like I said, a lot of the stuff I've talked about is in this book right here, Decoding the World.
Decoding the World. So how many pages is it?
It's 90,000 words.
So in 90,000 words, I can learn everything I need to know about decoding the world. So
that's right. 323 pages to decode the world. Talk about, we'll have to hop back on and talk about crypto next time.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. Do you have 5 minutes for the lightning round real quick?
Oh, please. Yes.
Okay. Course. Lightning round. Are you ready? Do you play video games?
No.
Favorite actor or actress of all time?
I just watched jiu-jitsu.
Okay, then jiu-jitsu. Who's your favorite jiu-jitsu artist?
Yeah, the favorite it's got to be Marcelo Garcia.
Okay.
Jiu-jitsu people will know who that is.
So this is very relevant to your jiu-jitsu. Do you have a theme song where you listen to it to get psyched?
I do. My walkout song for my 2 fights.
What is it?
The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
I like it. If you could evolve to have one special ability, what would it be?
This one's more personal than you probably think, but yeah, it'd be to cure cancer.
Please.
I'm working on that ability, by the way. Not as personally, but I'm working on the ability to cure cancer.
Please. Hey, we have a couple investments out there too, but good. Yes, that seems like a great special ability. You're stuck on an island. You have one meal for the rest of your life. What is that meal?
Oh, that's a no-brainer. That's a burrito, and we could say a grilled chicken burrito is always classic.
Yeah, there is in a burrito there is a lot of movement.
Yeah,
you try a bunch of stuff. It's a lot of things.
But you can eat the same burrito for the rest of my life. I'll be happy. As long as as long as it comes from a decent taqueria, you're good.
100%. Do you remember the last moment you laughed super hard? What was it at?
The girls were having a ball pit fight while I was training jiu-jitsu, and they were throwing balls, and it hit my opponent in the head while I was kneeing him in the head. It's anyway, it was funny to me.
That is funny in more comedic levels than I could have hoped for. I'm going to ask that question every time from now on.
And then I last night I was recording the audiobook for our book, and there's text messages and haha, laughing a lot. And they were like, "Okay, laugh." And I'm like, "Ha ha ha." And then it eventually turned into really hard laugh. So what the first 2 lines of my book is? Me and Poe, we really believe in this. But I say this all the time. Life will always be more work. The least we can do is make it more fun.
100%. There's a quote from my favorite movie ever called Van Wilder that's very similar. Yeah. And it's, you can't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like the hard work part of it also. There's no hard work in my quote. You have a hard work element.
Yeah, you think about it, right? No matter what you do, it's hard. No matter what you do, everyone on this planet works hard, right? Like
in their own way, in their own world, in their own prisons. To your point,
everyone's fighting their own battles, and I always respect that, right? Like, I mean, I had a time in my life where I wasn't working. I basically closed my position on the floor of the exchange. I was an options trader, and because I found making money without value creation to be utterly devoid of meaning, and actually ruinous to someone's character. And I would just sit there at the coffee shop, looking around, going, "God, I wish I had a purpose in life." Like all these people are going somewhere. So even people that are like not work, like
they're searching.
They're searching. It's a hard time. So like, I never try to take away anyone's. Like you look at someone else's situation from the outside, you'll never understand it.
Which is a perfect way to lead into my final question, which is, what is your definition of success?
Okay. So I won't know if I'm successful until I'm dying. Right?
And you already sort of answered it earlier. You said like, I'm never going to be able, I can't write the how to be successful thing, but like, what's your definition of success?
Yeah. On my deathbed, I mean, they're going insane upstairs. I don't know if you can hear the girls.
I don't know if you can hear mine. I'm like, can he hear? Like literally, there is a jujitsu smackdown happening with my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old.
The girls are going insane. So success to me is very simple. On my deathbed, if my 2 girls say to me like, "Thank you for helping make the world we're going to move into better and our lives better," that's important. And then thank you for being a great dad. And if I am a bad dad, if doing the former is at the expense of being a great dad, then I failed as a human being. So, like I think so often, and I've seen this with people, you get so laser focused on trying to do the thing you're trying to do and you have fun doing it. And so everything else goes away. And like for me, once I had kids, it's a commitment to making sure that you're going to, like the only thing you could do is do your best. That's how I live my life. The only, like I can sleep well at night no matter what I do because I'm doing my best. If it doesn't work, well, shit, I did my best. If I don't do my best and it fails, well, that'll eat at me for 30 years because only I know, and only I will know that. But it will tear me apart inside. Oh. So, for me, it's those 2 things, right? Like that I was a great dad and gave, myself, not resources, but myself to my kids.
Well, equity, sweat equity, more equity.
That's a great way to put it. Like so many, like you can't replace cash with time, and so many, like I just, at least I don't want them to do that. So it's a balance, and I have to play that balance. Like, could I be a better VC by spending every waking and sleeping moment thinking about venture capital? Sure, absolutely.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Have you ever negotiated with a 3 or a 6-year-old? Because it is way harder than negotiating with a founder.
That's true. We should write a book. Our kids should get together and write a book.
I would love that. Hey, this was amazing. Thank you so much, Arvind, for taking the time.
No, it's always great to speak with you, Adam. I think you think super big, and it's not that often that people are able to swing from topic to topic and connect dots across the universe.
Well, I appreciate it's like you're filling in all my dots though. Like that was the impressive part of this. I was like, well, yeah, I'm like jumping all over the place. And you're like, well, but back to the really important thing we talked about, right? But it was perfect. This was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in during your busy day to learn about Sci-Fi technologies. For more info on what we do, check out our website at www.boost.vc or give us a follow on Twitter and Facebook at BoostVC. A big thank you to Maddie Callender, Coy Lee, and Ben Lavelle for their support in creating and producing this podcast. A musical thank you to Mellowdrive and their AI composer for our amazing intro and outro songs. If you need music for your digital content, check them out at mellowdrive.com. Lastly, thanks to Tim Hollowell with the podcast group in Washington, who did an incredible job mixing this audio. Boost VC is all about helping amazing sci-fi tech succeed. If you have an idea you think we should hear, get in touch with us at boost.vc/contact. And make sure to sign up to get notified when applications open for the next Accelerator Tribe. Also, we love to hear from our listeners. So rate us and drop us a comment on whatever streaming service you use. We would love to hear feedback. That's it for this week, and unfortunately, we don't have enough time for Mark Zuckerberg. But be sure to tune in next week when he's available. This is Adam Draper signing off. Pew, pew, pew.